Hi friends, this is World Maker Books and I'm Joy. We are here today to continue the reading of Black and White by Mark Wandrey. We are at Chapter 4, and so we're just going to get on with it. Chapter 4, PCRI, Molokai, Hawaii, Earth, August 29th, 2035. Terry watched the TV news in the kitchen with half his attention as he ate breakfast. His tablet sat unused, his unfinished homework languishing as he ate. There'd been a brief bit about the Hawaiian Junior Baseball League Championship on the Big Island. He was still stinging from the beating his team had taken in Oahu 2 weeks ago. Yui said they'd been beaten so bad, charges should have been filed. In further news, it has been reported from China that the infamous Golden Horde mercenary company, one of the so-called Four Horsemen, has experienced a change in ownership. Terry focused on the news report. Anything about human mercs was interesting stuff. All the kids in his class were completely fascinated by the stories of the Horsemen, or any of the other myriad companies which had sprouted up in the last few years. When we contacted the Golden Horde's press liaison for a more in-depth interview, however, they declined to offer information beyond their basic press release. In further news, the world government has approved the Global Development Incentive Act, which, among other things, establishes a 5% tax on all mercenary income. Terry tuned it out as his interest in the story waned. His mother came in and offered him some more toast. "No thanks," Terry said, so she headed back for the kitchen. "Oh, Mom?" "Yes?" "Is Craig going to be back in the tank today?" "Yes, the doctor said he's clear to return." "Do I get to find out what kind of surgery he had?" His mother grinned slyly before she answered. "I'm sure you will. Cray says he's been missing you." "Really? Cool. Hurry back from practice after school. We need you to help with the dolphins, too, before you can see Cray." Terry nodded, glad they hadn't had plans to dive. Doc had been too busy since the dive on the Dixie Maru to take them out again. Yui and he had been forced to subsist on snorkeling at the beach just down from the Institute. The day's lessons went slowly, partly because they'd just started back to school the previous week and were spending a lot of time going back over stuff, and partly because he was eager to see Cray again. They hadn't been using the translators much since Cray had had his mysterious surgery. The other orcas didn't want to talk about anything. They'd all seemed nervous about something. Yui wanted to go snorkeling after class, but Terry told her he needed to get back and do chores. She was suspicious, he could tell. He took off the first chance he got and rode his bike back to the Institute as fast as it would carry him. He forgot to plug it in and had to go back down to attach the bike to its charger before he could do his chores. After an hour of mopping the fish room and helping feed the bottlenoses, he went into the residence for dinner. He fairly jammed the food in his mouth, and his mother clucked with disapproval. She didn't stop him, though, because she knew why he was so excited. "Can I be excused?" he asked, though his plate was still half full. She looked skeptically at what was left. "Please?" "Go," she said, and he bolted. When he got to the resident tank, all 4 orcas were there. The other male and the 2 females floated next to Cray. As he entered, they immediately noticed him, and Cray gently floated over. "Terry, I greet!" Terry took a step back in surprise. "You can talk without a translator?" "I get talk box," Cray said. He turned sideways slightly, and there, just behind his huge eye, something was embedded in the orca's flesh. "The surgery implanted a translator," Terry said in amazement. "Talk box, yes! You like, Terry?" "Yes, it's excellent," Terry considered for a second. "You know my name now, too." Cray and the others had always called him Warden Calf before, a name he liked even less than Terrence. "Talkbox helped me know stuff." "What kind of stuff?" "New stuff." "That's informative," Terry thought. "Enjoying Cray's new side?" his father asked as he entered. "Yeah, it's cool. Alien stuff?" "An implant we bought to showcase their abilities. If we can get enough interest, we'll be able to get them for all the cetaceans. Even the bottlenoses?" "Yup." "Wow, Dad, that would be incredible. Who did the surgery?" "Dr. Janig. You remember, he did the surgery on Ulybka's fluke." Terry nodded. "James has done more surgery on orcas than just about any other marine biologist." "So it's a translator and something else?" "Just a translator," his father replied. "Then what does Cray mean by new stuff?" "We're not sure," he admitted. "We're still running tests." Terry looked back at Cray, and the orca looked back. "Can I help?" "It's better if you just do your chores and help with feeding." Terry looked down in disappointment. "I'll tell you what, maybe after we've finished our evaluation?" "Excellent," Terry said, and went to get the fish cart. Despite his complaints, he really enjoyed feeding the cetaceans. He'd been around a couple of times as the scientists had tried to get the hang of talking to the bottlenoses, which seemed to be going nowhere fast. He'd also talked with all the orcas. He wasn't surprised they'd chosen Cray to give a translator to. The resident orcas were far more talkative and willing to learn. The transients were another matter entirely. Terry rolled the cart into communal tank number 2 and saw a group of scientists working with the transients. He looked at the orca talking. The long, thin dorsal fin meant it was Uila, the dominant female. She was also the most communicative of the mostly quiet transients. The head of the group talking to the orcas was Dr. Orsage. Dr. Penna Orsage had been researching cetacean language long before the aliens had brought translators to Earth and revolutionized the process. Scientists had known cetaceans communicated for many years, though they were uncertain how and to what order. Did they merely express desires and information like where food might be? Or could they convey complex meanings and theories? Orsage had already been learning how orca society interacted and was correlating sounds and actions against those interactions. When the alien translators provided the words, Orsage put her previous knowledge toward making more sense of what the orcas were trying to say. Terry put fish on poles and held them out for the orcas to take one at a time. These animals weren't the passive, trained ones you found in places like SeaWorld. Their actions weren't as predictable, and even SeaWorld had experienced loss of life in spite of the training. Only a few of the most skilled marine biologists could enter the water with the orcas. Terry was certainly not qualified. While he fed the other 5, he listened in on the conversation with Uila. Was a decision based on many things, Dr. Orsage was saying. Not ask us, Uila said. Not ask Uila, not ask Ki'ii. Ki'ii was the dominant male and her mate. The transients took their lead from a female, unlike the residents, who followed a male. It was some of the sociological details Dr. Orsage was studying. No, we didn't. Wardens do without ask. There are complex factors you would not understand. Wardens think we calves. We don't think you're children, Orsage said in a steady voice. Uila snapped her jaws twice, rolled over with her pectoral fins, and showed her belly. She pushed away from the tank wall with her flukes and moved toward Terry, evidently to get a fish. Dr. Orsage sighed and turned off the translator before speaking. I guess the interview is over, she said. They're mad because you gave a translator to Cray? Terry asked from across the pool. He held a big mackerel out on his pole. Uila snapped it away so viciously she almost pulled Terry in after it. She took the fish, tearing it apart. The other orcas moved away from her anger. Not that we gave it to Cray, but that we didn't give it to her, Orsage said. You could argue she's jealous, another scientist said. That's a reasonable assertion, Orsage said, picking up her tablet computer and making some notes. The transient and resident pods have never been seen to interact directly. But orca specimens with resident traits have been spotted with transient pods, another marine biologist pointed out, holding up his computer stylus. 5 separate, discrete occasions. Orsage nodded, and in each occasion, the residents were eventually gone from the transient pods. Dr. Jean Meander suggested it was kidnapping for breeding purposes, still another marine biologist said. That's been pretty roundly criticized as apocryphal, Orsage said, with a wave of her own stylus. Terry kept feeding the orcas, keeping a careful grip on the pole after the earlier incident. He liked listening to the scientists arguing. His mother and father did the same thing sometimes. It wasn't like other grown-ups argued. This was science arguing. His father called it searching for consensus. He wasn't sure if he completely understood. After a while, all the other scientists left, and only Dr. Orsage remained. She watched the 5 transients eat and talk to each other. Her brows knitted together in concentration. He didn't know why they didn't just listen in. He would have. When the fish was all gone, he rolled the cart toward the door. He stopped before leaving. Dr. Orsage? She replied, not looking up from the orcas. Do the transients hate the residents? She turned her head and focused on him, seemingly realizing who was talking. That's a strong word, she said. Maybe too strong for the orcas. We don't know if any other species have hate in their repertoire. Terry's brows knitted and she smiled. I don't know if they can hate the way we do. Terry looked at the way Uila was swimming, then back at Dr. Orsage. Ma'am, she looks pretty pissed off to me. Chapter 5. PRCI, Molokai, Hawaii, Earth. September 7th, 2035. Dr. Matthew Clark watched the bankers' reactions and smiled. The entire group, all 10 of them, were staring wide-eyed as Cray spoke. Shul moved in deep water, deepest water. Shul was alone. Shul made first pod. Boy, girl, so have calves. Pod grew. Alone long time. Pod lonely. Shul fill water with life. Shul fill sky with life. Life good. Pod good. All good. Alice Kemp, president of Hawaiian Bank Corporation, turned to Matthew with her eyes wide and shining. That is beautiful, she said. Did you teach it that? Not at all, Matthew said, shaking his head. Then where did it learn that? Him, Madison said. I'm sorry? President Kemp asked. You said it. Cray is a male. Him. Surely it doesn't matter, another banker said. Him, her, it. They're just animals. Tell me, please, how many animals have a god? All 10 of the bankers gasped. That really doesn't matter, Matthew interjected, stepping forward to stop the fight he sensed was coming. They, the orcas, told us this story after the translator was installed, after a week or so for Cray to become used to it. He talked to the others in his pod, and they put this story into words we could understand. Don't you see? They created this. The bankers all nodded and looked at each other. Matthew could see an overlay of skepticism, so he pushed forward. Think about people coming here to Molokai to interact with these noble, he looked at his wife, beings. What other stories might they have within themselves? Ladies and gentlemen, we've met aliens from the stars. They came here and told us we were not alone. Now we fly off across the galaxy and do what? Kill them? Get paid? Is that our sole destiny? He gestured to Cray, who was floating on his side, lazily pumping his massive fluke to slowly move around the tank. Other intelligence was right here, among us, all along. The cetaceans are intelligent. They have language, a sort of oral history, perhaps even a mythology. People will come to hear about this. And pay to hear it? Kemp asked. Oh, without a doubt, Matthew said. You have your talking fish, she said, gesturing to Cray. Madison scowled as she continued. Why do you need millions of dollars, then? We appreciate the opportunity to invest in this project, but couldn't you do it yourself with this one talking whale? Sure, Matthew said, then shrugged. Probably. But with money, we can give all the rest of our wards these translators. More of their stories will come out, and they can grow as their own people, realize their potential. Kemp laughed, but the humor didn't reach her eyes. You talk as if they're people. Maybe they are, Matthew said. Maybe they are valuable people who can make you and I a lot of money. Chapter break. I feel like I need a shower, Madison snarled as she waved. Matthew grunted as he waved as well. All the scientists of the Institute stood at the steps by the main drive as the investment bankers climbed into their limos. In a few minutes, they'd be on private helicopters flying back to Honolulu. Yeah, but we have this, he said, and showed her the check for $10 million. Sure, she said, that's part of why I feel dirty. 25% of the Institute's profits from public outreach programming and any advertising revenue, she spat. All for filthy lucre. Sickening. Without this filthy lucre, as you so eloquently put it, we'd be dead in the water, and Cray would be the only cetacean to ever have a translator. Or worse, someone else would do it, and we'd sit here and watch. Think of the papers we'll publish. Is that what you're most concerned with, Matthew? She asked, turning a baleful glance his way. Getting famous? I want to help cetaceans, he insisted. If it takes some banker's money and a couple of jet ski commercials, so be it. Still feels like exploitation to me, she insisted. Perhaps, but we've agreed. He looked at the check. I'm going to turn this over to accounting and arrange to purchase the other implants. Looks like James has his work cut out for him. I'm sure Dr. Janig will be excited. Matthew didn't notice his wife's facetious tone. Yes, I bet he will be. The limos pulled away, and Matthew fairly ran inside, leaving his scowling wife behind. Chapter 6. Kaunakakai Elementary School, Molokai, Hawaii, Earth. September 17th, 2035. Terry turned in his tablet computer with a completed test. His teacher, Mrs. Teal, smiled as Terry slid it into the data slot on her desk. Then he went out into the busy hallway. He rather enjoyed being a fifth grader, the biggest kids in the school. Though he was right in the middle of the percentile for height as a 10-year-old boy, he towered over the little kids, and he loved it. After math, they usually had social studies, one of his least favorite classes. However, today there was something different going on. An assembly was called for all of the fifth grade kids. No description was provided. The only thing they were told was that a new program would be rolled out. Scuttlebutt was they were going to build a new middle school, but Terry doubted they'd call an assembly just to tell them about it. Besides, he'd have heard about it from his parents long before it was talked about at school. When he got to the school's auditorium, a huge room under a plexiglass dome that allowed in Molochai's natural sunlight, he saw he was one of the first kids to arrive. Of course, Yui was there already. She'd finished her math test 10 minutes before Terry. It was her favorite subject, while history was his. As he moved over to where his friend was sitting, Terry looked up on stage. The school principal, Miss Kalani, was standing there talking to several teachers. A man he didn't recognize was standing toward the back with one of the transparent computers the aliens sold on Earth, called a slate. Next to him was a woman in a U.S. military uniform. Now that's weird, he thought. Yui was gesturing wildly for his attention. "What's up?" he asked when he was close enough. "Don't you see who's up there?" "The military lady?" Terry asked. "No, stupid, next to her." Terry looked again. The man was wearing a casual suit, but didn't look comfortable in it. He chatted confidently with a military woman. He was built like a football player, with a shaved head. "Holy crap! Doc?" "Yeah," she said, "in the flesh." They hadn't seen him in quite some time. He'd left them both messages the week after they dove on the Dixie Maru to explain that he'd been busy, then nothing. Now he'd suddenly shown up at some strange school assembly, and who was the military woman he seemed to know so well? Terry waved when Doc looked their way. Doc saw Yui and him and gave them a subdued wave in return. Terry narrowed his eyes. "What's up?" he silently wondered. The rest of their fellow fifth graders came in slowly until the period was over, then the remainder showed up in a small flood until they were all there. The fifth grade teachers closed the auditorium doors and took seats to the side, not on the stage. Principal Kalani walked over to the podium and picked up the mic. "Good afternoon, students." "Good afternoon, Miss Kalani," they chorused. "I know you're all wondering why you're here. Well, it's to announce a new program that you'll be participating in, beginning next year in middle school. The United States government has been working on this program for more than a year, and funding has finally been approved." She tapped the computer built into her podium, and the screen behind her came to life, showing a shield-shaped logo. Along the bottom was United States of America District, and just above it, Republic of Earth. In the center of the shield were the initials MST. "MST," Miss Kalani said. The display showed words under the initials. As you can see, it stands for Mercenary Service Track. Currently, humans working as mercenaries for off-world employers are bringing in vast sums of money. As you may or may not have noticed, the government recently passed a modest tax on that income. These funds will help keep our government and the planet running. Now, this isn't going to be a political discussion, and many of you wouldn't want to hear it anyway. Mercs, as mercenaries are often called for short, are soldiers, but many of them don't actually fight. Some are technicians, some are medics, and some do logistics. Being a merc is a complicated job which pays well. With the introduction of the MST, all U.S. schools from grade 6 up are being given a budget to teach certain classes and provide knowledge which will help you decide if you want to pursue a mercenary career or not. Upon reaching junior year in high school, each of you will also be required to take a test, the Voluntary Off-World Assessment Test. "If it's voluntary, why do we have to take it?" Yui asked, and Terry snorted. Several others in their class were wondering the same thing. "I'm sure you're curious why it's called voluntary if it's compulsory." Apparently the test was labeled prior to the decision to make it mandatory. Miss Kalani shrugged, then grinned. "You can all consult your social studies for a reminder in how government works and doesn't." She looked down at her notes, then turned to the military lady and Doc. "Behind me here is Captain Leellen McCartney. She's been assigned by the U.S. military as your pre-6th grade liaison. Next to her is Lieutenant Commander Vincent Abercrombie, a U.S. Navy SEAL, retired. He'll be the MST instructor for the Molokai General School District." "Navy SEAL," Terry whispered. "Holy cow," Yui said. "I didn't know he was a SEAL. How cool is that?" "Explains why he's so good at diving and stuff," Terry thought. Captain McCartney came forward and took the mic. "Good afternoon, boys and girls. I'm excited to be here today. The opportunities you'll be offered next year and every year going forward are multifold. Besides being given specialized instruction on how to maximize learning to possibly begin a very rewarding career as a mercenary, you'll have the chance to give future generations on our own planet an incredibly brighter future." Terry looked around as Captain McCartney spoke, noticing the various reactions. Some of his fellow students were listening with rapt attention, while others were indifferent. Yui was listening intently, though she seemed to be staring at Doc more than anything. The teachers' reactions were much more interesting. Most of them looked, for lack of a better word, pissed. So, I think it's time to meet your new MST instructor, Lieutenant Commander Abercrombie. There was polite applause from the teachers. A few seemed to be pretending to applaud. Terry and Yui, like a few of their classmates, knew Doc, and they applauded enthusiastically. He took the microphone and cleared his throat. Some of you know me as Doc. After leaving the service, I became a charter boat captain and part-time teacher at Hawaii Community College. When Principal Kalani asked me to be the MST instructor, I accepted. You see, I'm a former SEAL. I was injured and had to retire. 10 years ago, my former team went off on the Alpha contracts, and none of them came back alive. He looked down for a second and shook his head. They were cocksure and convinced they were the best. And they might have been the best, on Earth. In the stars, they were ill-prepared. We know a lot of you might decide to be mercs someday. Who doesn't want to be rich and famous, right? From the looks on the faces of the teachers, nobody would. Terry didn't notice Yui grinning. Doc went on, We're going to teach some of the lessons learned out in those stars, and, thanks to information provided by the horsemen, we think we can help. Now, I know a lot of the teachers aren't happy with this plan. He looked at the aforementioned men and women, many of whom were openly glaring at him. Unfortunately, this idea wasn't mine, and we don't really have a choice. You don't believe it's proper to give what amounts to military instruction in a public school. He smiled, then shrugged. Maybe you're right, maybe not. Either way, I'm here, so I hope we can all make the best of this. Thank you. Terry thought a few of the teachers' applause was less grudging than before. Doc was easy to listen to, and what he said made sense. Terry wondered what it had felt like to have all your friends die a million light years away. Not good, he guessed. A pair of teacher's aides began to move among the students, handing each of them a green folder with a red, white, and blue stripe around it, and the same logo that had been up on the display. Terry and Yui got theirs and opened them to find pages describing a lot of what they'd just been told, and a description of the assessment test to be administered in 7 years. It's a lot of work to do for something nobody really wants, Terry said to Yui. She made a non-committal noise. As they walked out of the hall, Doc was there talking with the principal and Captain McCartney. Hey, Doc! Hi, kids, Doc said. Or should we call you Lieutenant Commander Abercrombie? Yui asked, a twinkle in her eye. Knock it off, he said. Lee Ellen, I'd like you to meet a couple of the kids I teach diving. He gestured toward them. This is Terry Clark and Yui Tanaka. Oh, well, nice to meet you two. Did you have any questions? Not really, Terry said. Yui? Doc asked, looking at her. Terry glanced at Yui, who cast a furtive look back at him, then shook her head. No, she said. Well, don't be late for your next class, Doc said. Will you have time to go diving soon? Terry blurted out. Yeah, in about a week, I think. I'll send you a message. Excellent, Terry and Yui said at the same time. Terry waved goodbye, as did Yui, and they headed off. The whole thing is so strange, Terry said a minute later, as they walked toward the science building. What do you mean? Yui wondered. Well, mercenaries. You watch old 20th century movies and stuff, and mercenaries are the bad guys. Everyone hates them. Now they're heroes? Yeah, Yui said. Terry glanced at her as they walked. He wasn't sure in what way she agreed with him. All right. That, my friends, is the end of Chapter 6. We will see you here on Wednesday, same time, 8 o'clock, for chapters at least 7 and 8, maybe 7, 8, and 9. Depends on the length of the chapter and how long I feel like reading. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed yourself this evening. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you've liked what we've done so far in general, please click subscribe. And if you think your friends would like it, please share the video. We'd love to have more people enjoying what we're doing. Thanks, and see ya on Wednesday. Bye.